Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, the chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And today, we have a special edition of the show where we recapture the finest moments in commentary, bringing you the best of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz.
The Israeli police recently released a statement of its findings that would lead to indictments of Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as his wife and several others, and in more than one cases that are under investigation. And President Trump is facing the completion of the Mueller investigation. So, Alan, you wrote an op-ed in Haaretz recently that reflects your views. Can you share these thoughts with us?
I think it raises very great dangers to Israeli democracy were a prosecutor to indict anybody based on alleged deals made between government officials and journalists. Journalists make deals with every single government official. Every government official in the world wants good press, and every journalist in the world wants support from the government. And the minute that prosecutors start to intrude into the delicate relationship between what we call the First Amendment, but what Israel recognizes as freedom of the media and government relations, I think it poses serious problems for democracy. So I think it would be good for democracy if these allegations were dropped. As I say in the article, if you don't like Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister, vote against him. But you can't use the criminal law to try to undo elections. The same thing is happening in the United States with the Mueller investigation. Look, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I don't support the Republicans, but I strongly oppose the criminalization of policy differences, both in Israel and in the United States. That poses a tremendous danger for democratic governance and gives far too much authority to police and prosecutors.
Well, Tzachi, do you want to react to that?
You know, in Israel, we don't deal with American domestic issues, but about our own problems. The hearts of many Israelis go out for the agony and the torture the Prime Minister is going through. I can understand the fact that you need to investigate, and sometimes there are suspicions and allegations, but I'm telling you, the Prime Minister is a miraculous thing that happened to Israel. He's so knowledgeable, and he's so appreciated by so many world leaders. And I'm going with him to those meetings, and I see the way real superpowers appreciate his policies, his understanding, his perspective, his economical and historical knowledge, and it's an asset for the state of Israel. So as Professor Dershowitz put it in a very strong way, kick him out, but do it in the polls. You cannot do it by false accusations.
Well, Tzachi, as Minister of Regional Cooperation, can you tell us about your vision and perhaps some of your biggest projects like the Red Dead Canal that will connect the Red Sea to the Dead Sea?
Yes, I'm lucky, I would say I'm privileged that I hold the Ministry of Regional Cooperation in such important times, because these are the years where you see the shift, you see the amazing change in the way Arab countries, Arab leaders understand Israel. Suddenly Israel is not the demon, the devil, the monster that they used to portray us for so many decades. Israel is considered and perceived as an asset, not only as a partner, but as an asset to the very existence of so many Arab countries. And they understand that when we have the capability to fight against Iran and against its satellites and against the Islamic Jihad and against radical terrorism of the Islam and against Daesh, ISIS, we are doing their job, because those forces are also aimed to bring them down. So in my ministry, we deal more and more with those countries, and some countries we have peace with, like Jordan, and we are working on a very, I would say, gigantic project. It's called Dead Sea, Red Sea. It's about bringing water from the Red Sea all the way down to the Dead Sea while producing energy, green energy to the area, and desalinations of water and supplying water to Jordan that is desperate for water. This is a resource scarce in Jordan, and it's very important for us that Jordan will be stable and that the regime will be able to go forward with its support to the peace and to the West. And altogether, I think this project, once implemented, will make so many people able to taste the fruits of peace and will encourage more and more Arab countries to follow the footsteps of Jordan and Egypt.
Our next topic is the payment to terrorists by the Palestinian Authority. Now, Cooper, you've written extensively and briefed top officials both here in Israel and in the U.S. What is at stake here? And both from the Israeli perspective and from the American perspective, are we both doing enough?
The amount of money they spend on paying salaries to terrorists and for the families of deceased terrorists is 7% of their budget. It's 1.27 billion shekels, like $335 million a year. It's 7% of the budget. It's about 45% of the foreign aid they get. So every penny they get from the international community, 45% of it go to pay salaries to terrorists. That's something that, of course, is in total breach of their commitments under the Oslo Agreement. They were supposed to fight terrorism. Instead, they incite for terror. And as a matter of fact, this is a situation where they actually solicit terror because they promise this aid in advance. Anybody who goes to carry out an attack, he knows that he's going to get this money. And we have a lot of testimonies from terrorists to say that was one of our considerations. When the special envoy of the United States government, Jason Greenblatt, actually tweeted asking the Palestinian Authority, you have to decide whether you want to be a political entity or a terror organization. And as long as you decide that you want to pay the salaries to the terrorists, we understand what your decision is. So, and the funny thing is that Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, repeatedly say, even if I have only one penny, I'm going to continue using it to pay the salaries to the terrorists. So finally, the United States has adopted the Taylor Force Act, and they have stopped paying or giving aid to the Palestinian Authority budget. And Israel has adopted what is called the Stern Law, after member of Knesset Elazar Stern, that says that beginning this coming January, next month, Israel is going to deduct from the money it collects and delivers to the Palestinian Authority the 1/12 of the money that the Palestinians paid to terrorists in 2018. So this, for the first time, the Palestinians understand that there is a price for this policy. Now we want to see more people joining in order to send this message to the Palestinians. Now I want to say one word about it, about the importance of this. The entire situation that we are fighting now is about the attempt to convince the Palestinians to change their strange, fraudulent narrative that paying salaries to terrorists is part of it, this idea that terrorists are heroes. And this effort, the international community has to join forces in order to convince the Palestinians to change this narrative. The Americans did a big and important step in this direction. Israel is finally doing some steps. But the messages coming from Europe are not helpful. And we have to see a change over there too.
Alan?
What I've done when I've advocated stopping payments to the Palestinians for paying terrorists is I make an analogy to the mafia or other criminal organizations. If the head of the mafia had said, look, anybody who kills my rival, I will pay him a certain amount per month, that person would be guilty of accessory to murder. That person would go to jail. The person who offered the bounty would go to jail. And it is criminal for any individual or any group to offer a reward to a criminal, to offer a reward to a terrorist. And the European community should recognize that they are encouraging criminal conduct, terrorist conduct. You know, today the victims are a Jewish pregnant woman on the West Bank. Tomorrow the victims can be people in the middle of Paris and the middle of London and the middle of Rome. Of course, we've seen that. And so the idea of anyone in the international community encouraging terrorism by offering to pay the terrorists a bounty, it's going to come to a theater near you because inevitably, when terrorism is rewarded, it spreads. Many years ago, I wrote a book called Why Terrorism Works. And the thesis of my book is terrorism works because it's rewarded. This is many years ago. Netanyahu wrote a similar book talking about how terrorism has been effective because the international community has refused to sufficiently condemn it. So I think that this is a very, very important issue, and I'm proud of the fact that finally in the United States, we're coming to grips with the support we, as Americans, provide indirectly to terrorism when we pay the Palestinians money that they use to then encourage terrorism.
I wanted your take on the pullout of the United States from Syria, and after that, of course, Trump's top generals resigning. What do you make of that? And are there wider issues here? And what other players will be affected, including the Russians, the Kurds, and Turkey? And speaking of which, what do you make of Turkey wanting to have closer relations with Israel, specifically President Erdogan's invitation to Trump? And this coming at the same time that President Putin, almost the same day, is stating that U.S.-Russian relations are at the lowest since the end of the Cold War. How do you put all this in perspective? Dan?
Well, first of all, regarding the withdrawal from Syria, I think it's a mistake. I think that it continues a very poor legacy left by Barack Obama, who has actually ceded the Middle East to the Russians and to the Iranians to a great extent. I think that one of the problems in Barack Obama's foreign policy was that he created a situation where his allies felt they could not rely on him and his enemies felt they could get away with murder. And he's actually created a perception, which I think is wrong, of a weak America. And that is something which in the Middle East is where power is everything and where people understand strength is a very, very dangerous thing. Now, by pulling out of Syria, I understand against the advice of his generals and certainly Mattis and others, and I understand even John Bolton, who is a very good friend and who I had the privilege of working with at the UN. I think that the president is sending the wrong message and is indeed ceding the Middle East in general, and especially Syria, to the Russians and the Iranians, and creating a situation where very soon we may find Iranians on our border, something we will never, ever condone.
Wow.
And apparently, at least according to news bulletins, we already made it clear yesterday that we will do what we have to do to prevent any Iranian presence in Syria.
Alan?
Look, I agree completely. I think that the decision is a disastrous one. I have criticized it. But I'm not sure it's going to be carried out so quickly. President Trump has a way of saying things that are dramatic and then doing things a lot more slowly. I hope that people like John Bolton, who I also know and respect, can have influence on the president and persuade him that you might want to announce the pullout, but let's make sure that special forces are kept. Let's make sure that there are enough soldiers. There are many, many, many reasons for this, not the least of which is it's so important to Israel for the United States to have a commitment never to abandon small, sometimes powerless countries. The Kurds are a wonderful people, an ally of Israel in many ways, an ally of America, a great tradition of more democracy than other countries, and to totally leave the Kurds to the mercy of Erdogan and to the mercy of the Syrians and the mercy of Iran and to be protected by the Russians is a terrible, terrible thing. You know, the Kurds have a stronger case for statehood than the Palestinians. I've never seen a demonstration on behalf of Kurds on campuses. It's the phoniest issue. There's no ever any BDS movement against those who oppress the Kurds. There are many more Kurds. They have a separate language, variant of their religion. They have a much stronger case for statehood than the Palestinians ever did. And yet you see no support for the Kurds. So I'm very worried about that. I also want to join the ambassador's condemnation of the man I voted for twice, and that is President Obama in his second term had the worst foreign policy in the Middle East of any American president in history.
Just one last comment from you, Mr. Ambassador.
Well, in spite of the big problems we were discussing, I'm very optimistic, not only because I was a great friend and admirer of Shimon Peres, who said that optimists and pessimists end up the same way, so isn't it better to live as an optimist? But I think that Israel, I know that Israel will prevail. because it is strong, because it is excellent, because it is just, and because it is truly a beacon to the world of excellence and beauty and compassion. And with friends like Alan Dershowitz, there's no way we can fail.
Well, I can't think of a better thing. Alan?
I feel the same way. When you look at the ambassador, you look at a man who is economically strong, who understands the strength of the Israeli economy, the strength of the Israeli military. As you know, my favorite phrase from the Psalms is Hashem oz li amo yitain. God will give the Jewish people oz, strength. Then God will give the Jewish people peace. We will never get peace without strength. And we must maintain Israel as the strongest economic, military, democratic nation in the Middle East. It must always be capable of defeating all of its collective enemies if necessary.
Dr. Mark Banchik is a child psychologist from Connecticut who co-founded a national organization called Alums for Campus Fairness, the ACF. ACF confronts BDS on college campuses, mobilizing alumni as stakeholders in bringing colleges back to civility and to fairness. So, Mark, let's dive in. Tell us about your organization. What does it do? And what motivated you to start it?
So how did I get involved? I went to Vassar. 30 years later, after being a doctor, raising a family, living a life, right? Israel Apartheid Week comes to Vassar. Israel Apartheid Week. There's no Israel Celebration Week. There are no professors getting up celebrating Israel. It's a one-sided gig, and it's my college. So we started a group called FTI, Fairness to Israel, a group of college alumni from Vassar. We had 300 people right from the get-go. We covered Vassar. We looked at Students for Justice for Palestine. We looked at what they were doing on their Facebook pages. We looked at what they were doing in terms of bringing people to campus. We discovered that the head of Jewish Studies at Vassar was not pro-Israel, and we were upset. Alumni have power. Alumni have influence. We send our children to these schools. We give money to these schools. We support these schools, and we are the brand of these schools. And so Vassar College had to deal with us. We're almost like an autoimmune disease in that we saw a problem at the school not being able to provide fairness, not to be able to provide civility to the college students and to the Jewish students. And therefore, we were effective. We then segued from being fairness to Israel to deciding that we had a national idea here, that we could expand to college campuses throughout the country. And we started a group called Alums for Campus Fairness. By the way, Professor Dershowitz, notice there's no name of Israel in our title. It's Alums for Campus Fairness, because we're not asking the university to be pro-Israel. We're asking Yale to be Yale. We're asking Vassar to be Vassar. We're asking UCLA to be UCLA. And what does that mean? We define it simply. We want our universities to be a marketplace of ideas, a place that can provide civility. And if you're going to reject hate speech, reject anti-Semitism. And so at Vassar College, we were very effective. We discovered SJP, Students for Justice for Palestine, had a Nazi propaganda poster on their social media. It went to where? The New York Daily News. We went on further, and we expanded our ACF presence to Oberlin College. At Oberlin College, we discovered that Professor Karega, and I know that you know this story, that Professor Karega had put on her Facebook page vile anti-Semitic material that she wouldn't take down.
So let's have Alan. I'd like your reaction to this.
Well, first, I think it's a great idea. Universities are more than the current student bodies. The current student bodies, by the way, even the current student bodies are more than the few dozen, or maybe sometimes few hundred, that scream and yell and call Israel apartheid and genocide. But university administrators tend to deal with the squeakiest wheels. And so they tend to be more responsive to the virulently and sometimes violently anti-Israel and sometimes anti-Semitic small groups than they are to the majority on the campus. But the university is not only the current student body, but the past student body, the future student body, the faculty and administrators and a range of other people. So it's very important that you have expanded from just the university listening to the students. It's crucially important to get alumni involved, to get future students involved, to get administrators, faculty, to get everybody involved, and most important, to get the majority involved.
There's one thing I know statistically is that more people give money to colleges and their colleges than they give to any Jewish charity. I'm talking about Jewish people. So I think what Mark has hit on here is you're motivating the stakeholders. So Mark, if you have one sentence which you want to ask for Professor Dershowitz and your fellow alumni, what would you ask?
I'd say one is that we have results. Vassar's clearing up its problem. I think Vassar's getting much better. A new president, it's moving forward. Oberlin has a new president. They're trying to move forward. So we've been effective. Professor Dershowitz, if you're interested, we'd love to have you involved. We're mobilized. We're on 31 college campuses. NYU, we're at Columbia, we're at Berkeley, we're at UCLA, we're at Dartmouth. We could use your help. And finally, to the audience, I would really like you to join us. To the audience, if you are giving money to a university or a college, if you're sending your child or your grandchildren to a university or a college, make sure they hear your voice. Alums for Campus Fairness. Join us now, campusfairness.org. Thank you.
Okay, one point I have to add, and that is I will help you on one condition, that the effort not be, and I'm sure it's not, to censor speakers on campus, but rather to broaden the diversity of points of view, not to stop Students for Justice for Palestine from spreading their lies and their filth and their hate, but rather to make sure that there's an open marketplace of ideas where all points of view can be heard, because censorship on university campuses always backfires, always fails. It's both immoral and illegal.
All right, that wraps up this edition of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, please go to ILTV.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.